He runs away, and you watch him leave. Not by running away, not by slamming a door, but by withdrawing, gently, gradually, with that particular way of becoming less present without ever truly disappearing. He responds less quickly. He creates distance where there was closeness. He shuts himself off precisely when you need him to open up. And you remain there, with this pain in your chest, unlike any other, because it's not ordinary rejection. It's something more confused, more cruel, harder to name. Because you know what you went through. You know what you saw in his eyes in those moments when his guard was down. You know there was something real there. And it's not your imagination. It's not your naivety. It's not you telling yourself stories to avoid getting hurt. Perhaps he's been running away from you from the start, on and off, and you're caught in this exhausting cycle of approach and withdrawal that leaves you feeling more and more disoriented. Perhaps the withdrawal is recent. He moved closer. Something real began to take shape between you. And that's precisely when he pulled away. And you ask yourself this question, the one you perhaps don't dare to formulate out loud because it seems almost too difficult to hold. Is he running away because he feels nothing? Or is he running away precisely because he feels too much? Tonight, I'm going to show you what depth psychology reveals about this mechanism. And what you'll understand will radically change the way you interpret his withdrawal. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul the world has ever known, spent decades studying the deepest contradictions of the male psyche. That way some men have of being simultaneously attracted to and terrified by the same thing, of yearning for a connection and fleeing exactly when it becomes real. And among all his observations on human nature, there is one that touches on the heart of what you are going through. Jung discovered that the human psyche, and particularly the male psyche in its relation to intimacy, possesses a structure in which the depth of feeling and the intensity of flight are not opposites. They are often two sides of the same inner movement. The anima, according to Jung, is the feminine dimension of the masculine unconscious, the part of him that yearns for connection, depth, emotional truth. And it is also the part that he often doesn't know how to hold. The anima is the gateway to what he truly feels, and this gateway frightens him. Jung observed that men who flee intimacy at the very moment it becomes most real are not men who feel nothing. On the contrary, they are men who feel with an intensity they have not yet learned to bear. The intensity of the feeling exceeds the ego's capacity to contain it, and when the container overflows, the instinct is to flee the source, even when that source is what he desires most. This is not cowardice in the ordinary sense of the word. It is something older, deeper, more rooted in the way the masculine psyche has been constructed. And for you, tonight, understanding this changes everything about how you interpret his behavior. Jung observed that this type of escape, the withdrawal that occurs precisely at the moment of greatest closeness, follows a specific and documented psychological pattern. It's not random. It's not personal in the sense that you did something wrong, said something bad, or played a card poorly when you should have played it better. It's a pattern that belongs to him, a pattern that existed before you, a pattern that would be activated with any woman who managed to truly touch him, because it's not you who triggers the fear. It's the connection itself. And you must understand this deeply. You are not the problem. You are the opportunity for something within him to confront itself, something he may not yet be ready to look at. This is what really happens in the psyche of a man who is running away from a woman who has deeply affected him. According to the Jungian framework, there are two opposing forces within him. On one side, the anima, that part of him that recognized you, that approached you, that felt in your presence something he unknowingly sought. The anima within him wants you. The anima within him knows what you could be. On the other side, there is the shadow, or more precisely, the fear of the shadow. The fear of what true intimacy would reveal about him, his vulnerabilities, his unhealed wounds, his emotional incapacities that he has carefully kept hidden from you, and especially from himself. Because a deep connection functions like a mirror, and some men have spent years avoiding mirrors. When you truly touch him, when your presence, your gaze, your way of being with him reveals something about himself that he can no longer ignore, there are two possibilities. Either he stays and faces it, or he flees to avoid seeing. The flight is not a sign that he saw nothing. It is sometimes a sign that he saw something he doesn't yet know how to wear. And somewhere deep down, you already knew it. Not consciously, not with words you could have articulated, but something inside you knew that this withdrawal wasn't indifference. Something inside you sensed, in the very way he walked away, a tension. Something that resembled a man holding back more than a man truly leaving. Because we don't flee from what leaves us cold. We flee from what burns us. And here is the central paradox of what you are going through. The one that Jung would have stated bluntly, in a single sentence. He runs away because he feels something. And that is precisely what he doesn't yet know how to control. It seems almost cruel in its logic, almost unfair. The more he feels, the more he runs away. The realer the connection, the deeper the withdrawal. And you end up paying the price for something that should be good news, the fact that he's actually affected. But Jung would not see this as a cruel irony. He would see a profound, coherent, and in reality, hopeful psychological law if it is correctly understood. Here's why. The intensity of the escape is proportional to the intensity of the perceived threat. And the threat, in this context, isn't you. The threat is the transformation your presence imposes on it, because a true connection doesn't leave you the same. It compels you to evolve, to open up, to shed armor you've worn for so long you didn't even realize you were wearing it. A man who flees this transformation doesn't say, "I don't want you." He says with all the body language and behavioral cues of his flight, "I'm not ready yet for what you represent. I'm not ready yet for the version of myself you're asking me, without knowing it, to be." It's not absolution. It's not an excuse to accept everything. But it is a key, and a key changes the way you hold the door. Now let me show you the concrete phases of this mechanism, so that you can recognize where it is and where you are. I will call the first phase the magnetic approach. This is the beginning. This is the moment when everything seemed natural, fluid, almost inevitable. He was approaching. He was seeking your presence. He was creating opportunities to be with you that didn't feel like an effort because they weren't. They came from something authentic within him, from that part that had recognized you and wanted to get closer. You might remember that time, that lightness, that way he looked at you, saying something without putting it into words. Those conversations that lasted longer than expected, that went beyond the surface, that touched on something real. It was real. Jung would confirm it without hesitation. His anima had turned towards you. And when the anima turns towards you, it's not insignificant. It's not a superficial whim. It's something deep within his psyche that recognized something deep within yours. The magnetic approach is the phase where the unconscious has taken control, and the unconscious, unlike the ego, does not lie. The second phase, I will call it the threshold of fear. This is the pivotal moment, the one you may have experienced without understanding what was happening. There was a moment, you might be able to pinpoint it if you look back, when something shifted. When the closeness became too real, too intimate, too significant for the ego to handle lightly. Perhaps it was a conversation that became too personal. Perhaps a gesture, a glance, a shared moment that made the undeniable truth impossible to ignore. Perhaps it was simply the accumulation of all the previous moments that reached a tipping point, and that's where the withdrawal began. Perhaps gradually, perhaps suddenly, but it's there. The threshold of fear is the moment when the ego has regained control from the anima. The moment when the conscious part of him, the part that has built up defenses, distances, and avoidance habits, said, "Too close, too real, too threatening for what I believe I can handle." And he stepped back. Not because the feeling had disappeared, but precisely because it hadn't disappeared, and that seemed unbearable to him. The third phase, I will call it the inhabited distance. This is the phase you may be going through right now, and it's the most painful, because it's the most ambiguous. He's distant, but not absent. He doesn't reject you completely. He maintains a thread, sometimes thin, sometimes stronger depending on the day, that prevents you from truly moving forward without him, or truly closing that door. He returns intermittently, with just enough warmth so you can't assume indifference, and then he withdraws again with just enough distance so you can't assume he's still there. You live in this uncertain space, and something within you is exhausted by this uncertainty. Jung observed that this state, this inhabited distance, is often a sign that his inner struggle is at its most intense. He is simultaneously attracted and afraid, simultaneously longing to get closer and unable to do so without triggering his own anxiety about intimacy. And the result, for you, is this disorienting alternation. The distance he inhabits is not comfortable for him either. It is the visible symptom of an inner conflict that has not yet been resolved. I will call the fourth phase the involuntary signal. It's something you may have perceived without knowing how to interpret it. Even in his flight, even in his distance, he leaves signals. Signals he doesn't always consciously control, because they come from the part of him that's running away, not the part that manages his image. A glance that lasts a fraction of a second too long. A question asked about you that isn't necessary to maintain a polite conversation. A way of reappearing exactly when you had started to truly withdraw. These signals are not calculated. That is precisely why they matter. The unconscious speaks through these small gestures that the ego hasn't had time to filter, and what it says is that the connection is still there, alive, active, present within him. Even when his conscious behavior tells a different story, you perceived those signals. Perhaps you wondered if you were interpreting them correctly, if you were projecting, if you were giving yourself false hope. But it's no coincidence that you perceived something. Your intuition picked up on what its facade was trying to conceal. I will call the fifth phase the inner tipping point. This is the phase that is not yet visible from the outside, but which is preparing itself within him. At some point, every man who runs from a real connection reaches a fork in the road. Either he continues to run, and the connection eventually fades, not because the feeling was false, but because the running has gone on for too long. Or something within him, the pressure of the unconscious, the pain of his own distance, the growing awareness of what he is losing, leads him to choose a different path. This tipping point cannot be forced from the outside. You cannot provoke it through conversation, an ultimatum, or a strategy. It occurs within their inner world, at their own pace, according to their own psychological makeup. But it exists. And it often happens when he realizes, in a moment of silence, in a moment of solitude, in that particular hollow of the night where facades are useless, that he has chosen fear rather than life. But now, here is what Jung would add. And this is the part most people avoid, because it requires something difficult. During all this time that you are reading its signals, that you are traversing the uncertainty of its inhabited distance, that you are trying to understand what is happening in it, what is happening in you. Because Jung would gently, but firmly, turn the question back in your direction. Why do you remain in this uncertain space? What is something within you finding in this situation? Not consciously, not deliberately, but something. somewhere? Has the possibility of his return become more important than your own presence to yourself? Has his approval, his warmth, his return become the condition of your own equilibrium? These aren't questions meant to hurt you. They're questions meant to set you free. Jung called this the work of projection, the discovery that what we most intensely seek in the other is often something we haven't yet encountered within ourselves. Perhaps he's running away because he's feeling. But perhaps you're waiting because something within you isn't yet ready to fully exist without waiting for him. And it is there, in that question, that your true transformation lies. Because if his running away taught you anything, it might be this. You deserve someone who chooses to stay, not someone who comes back intermittently when the fear subsides. Someone who does the inner work to be able to be there, truly there, consistently, without leaving you to navigate alone through the uncertainty of his own inner conflicts. You deserve to be present, not to receive an unspoken promise. And the behind-the-scenes work, for you, is to honestly ask yourself, am I waiting because I truly believe in what we could be? Or am I waiting because I still need to understand something about myself, something that this specific situation is revealing to me? Both can be true at the same time, but only you can tell the difference between the two. Jung would say that the relationships that cause us the most suffering are also those that have the most to teach us, not about the other person, but about ourselves, about what we believe we deserve, about what we have learned to tolerate, about what we sometimes mistake for love because it resembles something familiar, even when that familiarity was painful. It's not his fault. It's not your fault either. It's simply what two incomplete psyches do when they meet. They reveal to each other what is still waiting to be healed. So this is where we stand tonight. He's running away because he feels it. It's real. What you perceived in those moments of his presence wasn't an illusion. What you felt between you wasn't invented. The connection was real, and it's precisely its truth that frightened him. But you, understanding this, don't have to decide to remain forever waiting for his courage. You can hold what you experience together with tenderness and truth, while continuing to walk toward your own life, toward your own depth, toward your own freedom, toward the version of yourself that fully exists, with or without him. Perhaps he will find his courage. Perhaps the turning point will come. Perhaps something in his subconscious will finally speak louder than his fear. But that cannot be the condition of your own movement. The leak says something about him, and your choice of what you do with it says something about you. He runs away because he feels, and you move forward because you have chosen to see yourself clearly. That's what true courage is all about. Not waiting. Clear-sightedness. Just tell me one thing in the comments. Are you currently experiencing that particular pain of being loved from afar, in silence? One word is enough. Just one word. I read every message. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if this video helped you put words to something you've been carrying around but couldn't name, share it with someone who needs it tonight. Sometimes, understanding changes everything. Take care of yourself.